ראיתי את דרכי נעלמת ביער סבוך בין קירות חורשים ובתוך האדמה המדממת רגליי ננעצו היכו שורשים ולרגע יכולתי לשמוע עלים מלמדים שירתם ורציתי לעלות גבוה לפרוח איתם הכרתי טיפותיו של הגשם נקבות בתוכי יורדות מתחתיי והרוח קרה ונואשת הקפיאה אותי הכבידה עליי ולרגע יכולתי לגוע בקצה הכאב האפור ורציתי לעלות גבוה לראות את האור לראות את האור אומרים השמיים כחולים מעלינו מלאים באורות אולי יום אחד אוכל גם אני לראות ונפלתי לארץ בשקט עצמתי עיניי אטמתי ליבי והרגשתי איך אני מתפרקת מכל כאביי
Ashlicha Naomi choreographed the dance to the song Lirot et Haor, to see the light. In 4th grade, we read the book Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. For those who have never read the book, Number the Stars follows the life of two families in 1943, 3 years after the Holocaust began. Anne-Marie, the main character, has a Jewish friend named Ellen. Ellen's family had to leave her with Anne-Marie's family because the German soldiers knew the names of the Jews and their addresses. In times like these, it is important to see the light. When Ellen left Anne-Marie to be safe in Sweden, Anne-Marie saw the light. Although sad, she knew that Ellen would be safer in Sweden. She picked herself up and thought about how she'd be seeing Ellen soon. This experience could have happened to many people in 1943, and I'm sure that they saw the light too. As Jewish people, we go through the ups and downs almost daily. However, our wise school and Jewish communities are what keeps us on our feet. Seeing the light in dark times can be hard, but together we will continue to move forward. Sometimes that's the only thing we can do. Although Anne-Marie didn't see Ellen for years, she kept Ellen in her heart by wearing the Star of David necklace. Sharing our Jewish customs, values, and education with others is what seeing the light is all about.
The words of Eli, Eli were written by Chana Senesh in 1943, a paratrooper who perished during World War II. You probably know this beautiful melody, so if you do, please join me. Tefillat things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
The El Maleh Rachamim is the collective feeling and hope that God will carry the souls of our loved ones. I'll read the words to you on the screen. God of abundant mercy, God Most High, may the souls of the 6 million who perished in the Shoah discover the perfect gift of peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold them close to you forever, so that their souls may be bound in your love eternal. May they find a home with you. May they rest in peace. And together we say,
Amen.
and
Please
I ask
rise.
that you please rise.
El Maleh Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amtei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Uteorim Kezororogia, Mazirim, Et Nishmot Shel 6 מיליוני היהודים, חללי השואה שהלכו לעולמם, בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
The Kaddish Yatom is included at every service, the mourner's Kaddish. We have to try to imagine the millions of people who choose to say the mourner's Kaddish for a loved one. Often they have to choose the date because they don't know the date when their loved one perished. Many of them chose Yom Kippur as the date so that it would have the power of the meaning of that day along with the memory of their loved one for whom they said Kaddish and Yizkor. I'll read to you the words of the mourner's Kaddish and ask you to please rise. And chant them with me. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach hirutei, ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei dekol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Leolam Ume Almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal, Shemei Dekudsha Brichu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Da'amiran ve'alma ve'imru, Yehi shlaba rabba min shemaya, ve'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru, Oseh shalom bimroma, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. Please be seated.
Out of mouths of babes. Mr. Paul Kester, on Sunday, when I told you about our program, I told you that you'll hear our students tell the stories of the Shoah. Some of the stories, personal. Some are more known. But all of them, our stories, the stories of every single human being. So before we hear your story, Mr. Paul Kester, our students.
Dear Kitty, I see the world gradually being turned into wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder. I can feel the suffering of millions. And yet, if I look into the heavens, I think that it will all come out right one of these days. That this cruelty will end and that peace and tranquility will return again. In memory of Anne Frank and 1 million Jews.
My great-grandmother, Frida, who turned 101 a couple days ago. Born in 1924, she was only 16 when World War II broke out. Living in Russia, she naturally wanted to avoid the war, so she fled to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Tashkent was a popular destination for refugees because it was far away from the front lines and had lots of support. It was a long and perilous journey, however, she was able to make it safely to Tashkent. This cannot be said about my other great-grandmother, Nelia. She was on a small boat on its way to Tashkent, but it got bombed by the Germans. As the boat began to sink, the captain was able to catch the attention of another boat, and they saved my great-grandmother's life. Afterwards, it was discovered that she had a large piece of shrapnel lodged in her knee. She survived, but she died in 2013. This speech is in honor of Frida and in memory of Nelia and 1 million Jews.
My great-grandmother, Olga Klein, who I call Softa, was a Holocaust survivor. Born Olga Rosenberger in a small town in Hungary in 1927, she grew up as the youngest in a family of 7 to Zygmunt and Maria, who were closely tied together by their Jewish faith. Everything changed for the worse in 1942 when her only brother, Jano, was taken to a labor camp never to be seen again. After the Germans invaded Hungary in 1944, Softa's family was removed to the ghettos and eventually sent to the notoriously brutal Auschwitz death camp. There, her parents and oldest sister, Kato, died. She and her 2 remaining sisters were sent to Bremerhaven, where they worked on a block factory. After a few months, they were sent to Bergen-Belsen, where they were eventually liberated by the British. Her sister Piri died of dry typhus just before the liberation. She wrote in a journal, just like Anne Frank did famously, and Softa and her surviving sister, Edith, treasured her words always. My Softa and Edith took a ship to the British Mandate of Palestine in early 1946, where they started a new life together in Tel Aviv. My grandma Tova, her firstborn child, born on May 7, 1948, just a week before Israel became a state. We should honor Softa's legacy and honor her perseverance, not what she had to persevere. I was privileged to know Softa for the first few years of my life. She left us with so many amazing lessons in making the most out of life. In memory of Olga Klein and 1 million Jews.
My great-grandma Lola Perester Gross was born December 5th, 1926. She lived in a small town in Poland. She was the youngest of 5 children. During the Holocaust, she was 13 years old. The Nazis came to Poland and were going to take her entire family to concentration camps. Her family gave her to a Christian family to hide and watch over her. The family who was hiding her got worried that they would get caught, so they turned Lola over to the Nazis. Lola was in cattle cars where many people died. She was in a few concentration camps and had to do hard work. She was finally sent to Bergen-Belsen, which was a death camp. Just in the nick of time, the British Army freed her from the camp and when the war was ending. All her family died in the war except for her and one sister. It was a true miracle that she survived. When she was in the displaced person camp in Germany, she got married and had my grandma Sally. Then she moved to America and lived the rest of her life peacefully. She died April 17th, 2017. This is in honor of my great-grandma Lola and 1 million other Jews.
My great-grandma lived under the British Mandate in 1941, Palestine, Israel. She lived in fear of German invasion. Upon her arrival to America, she faced imprisonment and scrutiny to prove she wasn't a communist, ultimately arriving in America with nothing but the clothes on her back. Meanwhile, my bonpapa, born in Russia in 1926, fled to France with his family during the Revolution, but their lives were shattered when the Nazis invaded. After a harrowing experience in a death camp that involved desperate escape attempt where he was buried underground for 2 days, he ultimately made his way to America where he found safety. In memory of bonpapa and 1 million Jews and in honor of Emanuela.
Yet we, the survivors, are not only responsible towards the dead, but also towards the coming generations. We must pass on our experiences to them so they might learn from them. Information is resistance. It is not enough to preserve everything in books, because a book can by contrast to a person, not to be interrogated. A witness must be a living witness. This is why I always admonish at survivors' meetings at which I spoke. You have children, you have grandchildren, and your neighbors have children. You must speak with them. You must tell them everything that you experienced and provoke their questions so that they can, in turn, tell of these experiences. It is only in verbal narration that memory stays alive, in memory of Simon Wiesenthal and 1 million Jews.
When I heard Miss Clement tell us about the Yom HaShoah Assembly, I immediately thought of my great-grandmother Tova Brock. She was born in Warsaw, Poland on 10/2/1919 and lived there with her parents, 2 sisters, and 3 brothers. Between 1939 and 1940, my great-grandmother with her parents and 1 brother were captured and taken to a concentration camp, where she was beaten and malnourished. Eventually, she and her family ended up escaping the Warsaw Ghetto to Lublin, to their cousin's home, where they were captured again and put into another concentration camp. From there, they escaped to Belarus, Russia, where her parents and brother died, leaving my great-grandmother alone. After the war, she decided to go back to Poland. After living in Poland for a few years, Tova met her husband, my great-grandfather, and together they moved to America, where they settled down and had 2 children, one being my grandmother. Sadly, with being in America for a few years, my great-grandfather got sick and died. My great-grandmother lived a long, happy life and died at age 98. I am the 4th generation to tell the story of the Shuach. When I listened to Miss Clement tell us about you, Mr. Paul Kester, it inspired me to tell my family story. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you to our school.
We started our assembly with Nomi dancing to see the light. We heard Cantor Emma, Rabbi Waznika, our fourth grader, our sixth graders. And when I met with Paul on Sunday, Paul said, Malka, I need it as much as you do. Right, Paul? And I have to tell you, when I knocked on the door and Paul opened the door, I saw the light. So here, Mr. Kester, you're sharing the light with us. Thank you so much. I have the clicker. Would you like it, or I can just go through, how would you like me to do this? Eli said you're a pro, but I'm a good helper, I promise.
No, I'm okay. All right. I hope you can hear me. You are remembering today the Shoah, the event that took place during the Second World War, during the years 1941 to 1945 in Europe, when 6 million Jews were murdered. You know all that. What sometimes is not mentioned is that among the 6 million, there were 1.5 million children, 1,500,000 children. A number that is hard to comprehend, but it happened. Well, I was not one of them, I was lucky. So let me tell you my story. I was born in 1925 in a town called Wiesbaden in western Germany, near Frankfurt. We were a family, middle class, parents, grandparents. I had one sister, 2 years older. I had a happy childhood. What do I remember? The earliest memories, when I was 4 or 5 years old, there was unrest in Germany. There was, like in this country, a Great Depression, a lot of poverty. And it helped to get a new government taking over. Its leader in 1933, Adolf Hitler, became chancellor, a position comparable to a president in this country. And he represented the Nazi Party. What were the objectives? What was the ideology of the Nazi Party? It was something new. They declared themselves to be the master race, superior to any other race. The master race being the Germanic race, the Germans. Now, all other races, were considered anyone who was not part of them was inferior. Now, in the town where I lived, it was a town of about 300,000 citizens, about 3,000 Jews, about 1%. In Germany at the time, its population was 65 million, including 600,000 Jews. Again, barely 1%. What do I remember when the Nazis came to power? All of a sudden, there were big signs all over town declaring the Jews are our misfortune. The Jews are criminals. The Jews caused us to lose the First World War. Being 7 years old, I had started school. I couldn't understand this. First of all, my parents, my grandparents, and all the other Jewish people in Wiesbaden, they were no criminals. And how could a small minority of 1% cause misfortune that had befallen the 65 million Germans at the time? But it was at this early age that I was exposed to government-organized propaganda. Yes, we lived in an apartment building with 10 other tenants. We were the only Jewish family. And yes, the other people in the building, we had a nice relationship. They liked us. And of course, to them, we were not anything different other than our religion. But if you hear the same thing time and time and time again, the Jews are our misfortune, eventually you wonder, well, maybe that family on the first floor, they are not part of it, but maybe the others are bad. Anyhow, I was in school. I had started in 1932. I was the only Jewish boy in a class of 35 boys. Boys and girls were kept separate, went to separate schools. I was not treated any different by either teachers or the other kids. How the change in government affected the adults, I could only feel a little bit, because what they were experiencing, they tried not to get us children burdened by it. But all of a sudden, Jews could no longer exercise certain professions. The businesses that they had were limited and restricted. And other laws, years following that they took power, impacted Jewish life and the ability to a normal life. And all of a sudden, we heard that maybe one had to leave Germany. Now, for my family, this was hard to conceive. We could trace our ancestry back to about the year 1400, always living in Western Germany. We were fully assimilated in society. We were not Orthodox, but we observed Jewish holidays, and my sister and I, of course, went to religious school and were raised as Jewish kids. Well, as I said before, my life was not impacted much by it. I could go to school. Could take part in all activities as all the other kids. Now, at the age of 10, under the then existing school system, I was supposed to start high school. And there were in Wiesbaden three high schools for boys. My father tried to enroll me in one. He was told by the principal that he could not guarantee the safety of his child. The school was 100% Nazi. It was basically a rejection. The other school had some other excuse, but the third school did accept me and my close friend Leo, and now we were two Jewish boys in the class, again of about 35. Again, not mistreated by either teachers or students, normal. We could participate in everything. Yes, academic requirements were higher now, and under the Nazi system, physical sports were become rather important. But both Leo and I, we were good students and also belonged to the Jewish sports club and could easily compete with all the other kids. Yet, life continued for me like all it was before. But by 1938, the Nazis were in power now for 5 years. Immigration became more of an issue, and even my family had to think about it. And they contacted some relatives in New York for could they provide affidavits of support, which were required at the time to gain entry, legal entry to this country. Relatives responded. They couldn't do it for all of us, but they were willing to take one of their children. And in the summer of 1938, my sister, now 14 years old, traveled alone. In those days, one took a boat from Europe to America. And here, this 14-year-old girl said goodbye to her family and goodbye to everything she knew, but conscious of the fact that she was leaving a country where now her future was uncertain and possibly endangered. My life continued. That summer, I traveled. I was 12 years old now, visiting my relatives in different parts of Germany, came back, again resumed school, sports activities, hobbies, even starting preparation for my bar mitzvah. And I was with my Jewish friends. We had a free run of town. We could attend movies and any other social events. Until one day in November, it was the 10th of November, I was in the classroom listening to the lecture with all the other kids when the lecture was interrupted by an school official who told my friend Leo and me we should go home. There was trouble in town. We didn't know what he was talking about. But of course we did as we were told. I come home, I find my mother and grandmother rather upset. Now, we lived, as I said before, in an apartment, and the family owned and operated a large clothing store in the center of town. And like every mid-morning, my grandmother and mother wanted to go to the store, but as they approached the center of town, they saw the synagogue in flames and some stores being vandalized. My father had gone earlier to the store to open it up, found a huge crowd in front. The store had many display windows, glass shelves, glass cabinets, and the people assembled outside the store were busy smashing it all. 2 policemen in attendance didn't interfere, but told my father to come with him. Trying to get through the crowds, he managed to sidestep and go into hiding, because what was happening that day, that is now labeled Kristallnacht or Crystal Night, that day a major pogrom, government-organized pogrom, was commenced of such dimensions that it was the beginning of the end of all Jewish life Jewish institutions. It was the beginning of the end for Jewish life in Germany and ultimately in all of Europe. Now, emigration was no longer a matter of discussion. It became a matter of life and death. But yes, the Nazis would let us out. They were glad to get rid of us. But nobody wanted us. The borders were closed. What happened to me during the days right after the beginning of the pogrom? My friend Leo and I went the next day back to school, were called to the principal's office, told Jewish children were no longer allowed to attend German schools. That was the end of my education in Germany. My father came back after a couple of days. Supposedly the arrests of the men had ended, because what was happening in those days? What did the pogrom consist of? Not only burning all of the synagogues, about 1,500 all over Germany, but all men between the ages of 16 and 65 were arrested and sent to concentration camps. A major tax was imposed upon the Jews of Germany, basically eliminating and confiscating any resources they may have had still at that time. Yes, after I came home from school that evening, my father had come back believing that the arrests had ended, but at about 9 o'clock at night, the doorbell to our apartment was ringing. I opened it. A man in civilian clothing identifies himself as a member of the secret police, tells my father to come. In a couple of minutes, my father is gone. My mother tells me, get on your bike, go to our friends, warn them, the arrests are still going on. I do as I'm told. I remember that dismal November night as if it was happening yesterday. The following day, my mother and I go to the police headquarters of the town. Where's my father? No answer. A few days later, we find out that he, with so many Jewish men, had been sent to a concentration camp by the name of Dachau, a camp that existed until its liberation by American troops at the end of World War II in the spring of 1945. Now, the next 2 weeks, my mother and I, we had to clean up the store. Actually, the firm had to declare bankruptcy because of its destruction, but we had to clean up the mess. For 2 weeks, I remember collecting and disposing of broken glass, broken furniture, trying to straighten out damaged merchandise. An activity that I still remember. At night I had the noise of broken glass in my ears. I couldn't sleep. And bad news came. What had happened to the men in the concentration camps. A cousin in his early 20s family was notified that he had died there. We later on find out that the guards had beaten him to death, and other similar notifications reach relatives and our Jewish friends. And then, in all this despair and upheaval, we learn, and this is all in a matter of days, that England declares itself willing to take 10,000 Jewish children from Germany, and some other countries in Europe were also willing to take some. My mother puts my name on every list, but first on December, 7th of December, 1 month after the start of the pogrom, my friend Leo, I bid him farewell at the train station in Wiesbaden. He's traveling to Amsterdam in Holland, where he has relatives. He got out. I wish him well. I'm left behind. I wish I could have gone too. After 4 weeks, my father comes back. He had always been in good physical condition and apparently had withstood the mistreatment, the starvation, the hardships imposed in the concentration camp reasonably well without any visible damage, physical or mental damage. And about the same time, it's now middle of December, we get a letter from a distant relative, a teacher at a boarding school in Sweden, telling us that Sweden had declared its willingness to take 500 children, Jewish children from Germany, and that school was supposed to take 30 of those 500, and she had put my name on the list. And 2 days later, we get a letter from the Swedish embassy in Berlin, Germany's capital, notifying me that I can obtain a permit that would allow me to come to Sweden. Now my name gets removed from any other list, and Sweden will be my destination and ultimately my destiny. To England, they had organized trains by different organizations for the children, for the 10,000 children. We could not figure out if anything like that was being organized for me to come to Sweden. But my father knew that there was an honorary Swedish consul in Wiesbaden at one of the German major chemical industries. We get an interview, and this gentleman receives us. My father says, "What do I have to do for my son to go to Sweden?" And the man said, "Put him on a train, get him out quick." It was good advice. So over the next 10 days, I say goodbye to my relatives. My personal belongings get packed to be shipped ahead of me to Sweden. They have to be packed under the close supervision and inspection of a Nazi official to make sure that I would take along only used clothing and personal belongings of no value, to make sure that I wouldn't be able to take along anything to the country that I was going to that possibly could be sold or be converted to or exchanged for anything else. And on the 9th of January, exactly 2 months after the beginning of the pogrom, 2 months that changed my life from a happy childhood, I bid my parents goodbye at the train station in Wiesbaden. We exchanged words expressing our hope to get reunited soon, and I start the 7-hour train ride from Wiesbaden to Berlin. I'm now 13 years old. I was supposed to have become bar mitzvah in late December, but with the synagogue destroyed and the promise that I could become bar mitzvah at the Jewish school in Sweden, it was not to happen at home. I get to Berlin, stay with a cousin. We go to the Swedish embassy. After a couple of days of red tape, I get the Swedish permit entered in my identification papers. And on the 15th of January 1939, I board again the train for the long trip to Sweden. The train's supposed to go through northern Germany to a German port at the Baltic Sea. It's the first time that I'm going to see an ocean. And the train then is supposed to go on a ferry that would carry the train on a 5-hour crossing from northern Germany to southern Sweden. What do I remember of that train ride? I guess the last inspection by a Nazi official in black uniform, secret police, of my papers, of my hand luggage. He confiscates a gift, a last-minute gift, a book. No books allowed. I couldn't care less. Finally, the train reaches the German port. The train gets on a ferry, and the ferry slowly moves. And I remember, as if it was yesterday, looking out on seeing on a slightly foggy January afternoon, I see the German coastline slowly disappearing on the horizon. And I felt a tremendous sense of relief, not for leaving my family behind, not for leaving the country where I had grown up, but aware of the fact that I was escaping from a country where now it was a crime to be Jewish. I get to Sweden, I get to a boarding school. I joined 60 other children from Germany, Jewish children, similar background of mine. They now become my new family. And over a long lifetime, I have stayed in contact with many of them, visiting them in different countries or here, and they visiting us. They were friends forever. As a matter of fact, one of the girls of that school, 10 years later, became my wife. I stayed at school for about a year, and then get transferred to another children's home. This is under the auspices of the small Jewish community of Stockholm, Sweden. I can start now the Swedish high school, and I can continue school until the age of 16. I want to continue studying, but there are no means to do that. So I come to Stockholm, Sweden's capital. I start working in an office, basic functions, but enough earning to pay for my room and board. And always wanting to continue my education, I enroll in a Swedish evening high school, where over the next 3 years I attend and am able to complete high school studies as they were required in those days, equivalent to about a couple of college years here. Yes, I worked all day, I studied at night, but those were good years. How did I stay in contact with my family? We did not have today's modern means of communications that you have. We did something different. We wrote letters. I wrote a letter to my family every week, and I received a letter from them. Now, I had come to Sweden in January of 1939. September that year, Nazi Germany invades Poland. The Second World War has started. Now, letters between Sweden and Germany get censored, and if anything is written that in the judgment of the censor, I guess, negatively reflects anything in Germany, or otherwise he doesn't like, he covers it with kind of black ink, so I wouldn't be able to read it. Many years later, not so long ago, I still have those letters. I took them to police headquarters here in Los Angeles, where they have a machine, I guess similar to an X-ray machine, that could read what was written under that black cover. They let me look through it. What did I see? White paper. Germans were good at eliminating things. They had not covered the writing. They had chemically exterminated it. Anyhow, we followed the war years. We saw the victory by Germany taking over practically all of Europe, except for two countries, Sweden and Switzerland. It saved my life. Yes, postal connections continued. And of course, in Sweden, we had contacts with what was happening on the continent. What sometimes in this country, first was learned towards the end of the war, we found out through people who had escaped or somehow information was obtainable. Yes, we learned that by 1941, Jews from Germany and Western Europe were being deported to the newly conquered countries like Poland, Western Russia, Czechoslovakia. And my parents wrote to me that they would have to leave in August of 1942, that they were being sent to a ghetto in what is now the Czech Republic by the name of Theresienstadt, that they expected not, that they may not be able to stay in contact with me. But I wrote to them separate cards, their names into Theresienstadt, registered mail with return receipts, and Germans being observant of international postal regulations. Within a matter of days, I had the receipts back with signatures and new addresses. And yes, I could write to my parents, and they could send me occasionally a letter under strict regulations, how many lines they were.
Let's do like 2 more minutes and
Okay.
then to questions.
Yeah,
I can help you.
I'll be done in a minute. And after 5 months, my letters came back with a stamp that the person to whom the letter was addressed had departed, was no longer there, new address unknown. I knew this was bad news. As a matter of fact, my parents were in a transport of 2,000 Jews from Theresienstadt, sent to Auschwitz, and upon arrival, all 2,000 were murdered. My life continued good in Sweden, but by 1948, I felt I wanted to leave Europe. I migrated to this country, arrived in Los Angeles, and ever lived here since. I was lucky. I was lucky to be one of 15,000 children that were saved under the Kinder Transport Program, 15,000. I was not one of the 1.5 million murdered. I was lucky that my parents were willing to let their children, young children, depart without chance of seeing them again. I was lucky I came to a country not invaded by the Nazis. I was lucky that Hitler lost the war. I was lucky that I came to this country, took advantage of its opportunities. I studied here again. I had a good life over the last 77 years, and I always welcome the fact to tell my story to you here and many others. And you're welcome to ask me any questions now. We got reunited in Los Angeles.
We can all just give Paul a round of applause for being here today.
Say that here. When something is overwhelming, beyond our comprehension, you often hear people say something like, there are no words. You heard that term before? There are no words. And the Shoah, the Holocaust, was so dramatic, so large, so lasting, so incomprehensible that there are no words. The great thinker, survivor, historian, storyteller, author Elie Wiesel took a vow of silence when he was liberated from Buchenwald in 1945. A 10-year vow of silence because he knew words would be a barrier. And it wasn't until his book Night came out that people really learned about the impact of the Shoah on individuals. And yet, without words, without hearing from people like Mr. Kester, without reading the many, many, many books that have been written by and about survivors, their testimonies, we would have no memory. Without people like you, Mr. Kester, we would never know. God bless you. Elie Wiesel was asked, are you concerned that the Holocaust will be forgotten? And he responded, no, I'm afraid it will be trivialized. What I think he meant by that was it would be just too easy to talk about it. It would become just another dark spot in history. Every single one of us has the responsibility and the privilege to survivors, to history, to our people, and to humanity to keep the Shoah in the minds of the world. You, my dear children here, are the last generation who will ever meet a Holocaust survivor. I want you to think about that for a moment. There will not be another generation. If you ever have the opportunity to speak to them, to ask them questions, to hear them, do it. It's a privilege and a responsibility. May we always, always remember those who have been lost, and may we always have hope for the future. What more appropriate way to conclude a service than with hope? Hatikvah, the national anthem of Israel, means the hope. And so we conclude with the words of Hatikvah. Will you please rise? Flags behind you if you want.
Kolot balevav benimo, nefesh Yehudi homiya, ufatei Mizrach
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Kester. There's a bottle of water right here. Thank you. As Rabbi Waznika said, there are no words. Eli from the Holocaust Museum, thank you for working with me and making sure that we are the privileged ones. And actually, Mr. Paul Kester is going to celebrate his 100th birthday, December of this year. So early happy birthday, early. Thank you, everybody. We're gonna walk quietly and we're gonna make our way so that we can meet you in the foyer.